I'm Kristen, and I'm a pregnancy coach that works with pregnant mamas all over the world. I help you go from anxiety and overwhelm to enjoying your pregnancy, preparing for a sacred natural birth, and giving your baby the beautiful beginning that you're dreaming of. Today, let's talk about the consequences of childbirth interventions. So that means something that happens during your birth. Sometimes interventions are routine. For example, having an IV of Pitocin put in because they want to augment your labor, make it go faster, or they actually want to induce you. So that's an intervention right off the bat. Breaking your water. So those are all things that are routine interventions, and they have varying levels of effects. And then also, childbirth interventions could be emergency things like an emergency cesarean or emergency forceps delivery or an episiotomy. So all of these are interventions. They're things that change your birth and the course of your birth so that it's different than it may have gone without that intervention. And what we often see happen to moms is that there's what's called a cascade of interventions, meaning one intervention leads to another, to another, to another, to another, and you often end up with something like an emergency cesarean or a birth that's made much more difficult than it needs to be. In fact, postpartum hemorrhage can often be part of a cascade of interventions and can be caused by those interventions where we think that we need to be at the hospital to save us from something like that. Sometimes it's the situation at the hospital that caused it, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So one of the most profound things that happens when a mom ends up with intervention after intervention after intervention is birth trauma. This is real. I have talked to so many moms on the phone at this point. I've worked with so many clients at this point for whom birth trauma was really a big deal. There is that feeling after your baby's birth that, yes, you have a healthy baby and you're grateful for that. I actually have done a video talking about the myth of, well, you have a healthy baby. But there's this sense and this feeling that something wasn't right. And sometimes things were done to you that are outright traumatic that you did not want to happen to your body and were done to your body anyways. Things like an internal exam where somebody puts their fingers inside of you when you didn't want them to. That is literally a definition of abuse. And yet it happens to pregnant and birthing women every single day. Women are coerced into things like that every single day, even though the reality is most of the time, something like a vaginal exam doesn't give any great information. You could go, like I did, from being only 3 centimeters dilated, to having a baby 2 hours later. The vaginal exam that I experienced to let me know that I was 3 centimeters dilated was traumatic for me. It made me swear off of them forever. Now, sometimes baby's in a wonky position and something like a vaginal exam can help your care provider figure out what's going on so that you can move, or they can, say, help push aside an anterior lip from the cervix, and moms are grateful that they had it. But the point is that an intervention is something that should be carefully considered, and it should only be done when a mom is consenting to it, not because she was coerced or because fear tactics were used, but because she truly consents. And that's what happens to most of the moms who I work with, is they feel like they were coerced into an intervention because scare tactics were used. Oh, if you don't do this, something's gonna happen to your baby. That's what's used. And then there's the implication, you wouldn't want to be responsible for that, would you? You don't want to be that mom who puts herself in front of her baby. This is not actually just a medical provider thing. This is like a societal ickiness. And I know that's not a technical term, but it's like this societal belief and societal implication that gets pushed upon us as women when we want something otherwise for our birth. And some women who want to have a natural birth experience and are saying no to certain things even feel like care providers sometimes want to push interventions on them just to get this troublesome person to sit down and be quiet and not make waves. So one of the things that I remember talking with a mom about is in the course of our phone conversation, she had a vaginal birth, a pretty standard hospital birth. She said when you looked at it on the surface, it didn't look bad. I went in and they, got hooked up to the IV and this, that, and the other, and they went through all the motions and they checked me periodically and then they coached me through pushing and I had the baby and it happened pretty much according to the textbook. And she said, that experience was transformational, Kristen, but not in a good way. Like she just felt this sense of emptiness and just that it wasn't right, that her voice had been taken, that any control that she had was gone, that she was just a cog in a machine. And so even routine interventions can end up leaving something lacking. One of the biggest reasons why that happens is because birth is physiologically designed to be different than that. Birth is physiologically designed to bring a sense of ecstasy, even euphoria, but certainly a little bit of a winner's high at the end of that birth. Birth is designed to be safe, it's designed to be efficient, and it's designed to bond a mother and baby together. Pregnancy, I don't know that I could argue that there's necessarily a hormonal basis for it. There's clearly a hormonal basis for birth to be ecstatic. But I believe that pregnancy is also meant to be a time where a mom is able to grow in her strength, in her autonomy, in her power, in her inquisitiveness, in her curiosity, and in her ability to ask questions and advocate for herself and for her baby, to be ready for that moment of birth. You don't just start at birth making choices that are the right choices and advocating for yourself. You have to have done that all throughout your pregnancy, then to be ready to do it in your birth. And sometimes there's significant emotional work that goes to get you to that place. Really, the effects of childbirth interventions that make you feel like you're nothing more than a cog in the wheel, or interventions that get increasingly more interventive that can cascade into a traumatic birth experience that ends with something like postpartum bleeding or ends with a cesarean, that when you look back on it later, you're going, I just don't really think that was necessary. But to the hospital, it's nothing. There is a cavalier attitude to cutting women's abdomens open and doing this major surgery because it's just done all the time at greater and greater percentages every year. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't matter to you and that it doesn't impact you in a way that goes far above what they say. So if you would like some support, if you would like somebody that's there walking along beside you as you make these choices throughout pregnancy, as you do this exploration, as you find this curiosity, as you ask these questions, and as you prepare for a sacred birth experience that honors the way that birth was meant to happen, both safe, smooth, and a wonderful experience that primes you and your baby for bonding, I would love to talk with you about my pregnancy coaching and how I support you through that. Head over to birthbabylife.com/beautiful, and I will talk to you soon.